And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Papiden.
I'm your co-host, James McVeigh.
James is not with me in studio tonight, quote unquote. He's on remote, so that's going to work out well for us. Tonight on Fermenting Opinions, we're talking about what happened in Charlottesville. Everyone, I'm sure, unless you've been living under a rock, I said this on Monday too, you heard about the violent clashing in Charlottesville. The result that ended in the death of one lady that got run over. So we're here to talk about that. We're here to talk about sort of what the reactions are, and where this is going moving forward. Anybody want to start off, James?
Just one moment while I do the little technical things that I'm.
Oh, okay, yeah, I put him on that. Sorry, yeah, that's my fault. He's posting our YouTube to our group, Fermenting Opinions. We're also on YouTube. This is if you're watching on YouTube. We also have our website and the podcast, fermentingopinions.com. Check us out on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher. We're all over the place. Shout out to Ross James and Ross James Media for being a tech wizard and making sure all this works for us. Very much appreciate him and his help today in setting me up. If this looks different and better lit, it's because we're in my dining room now, which is the studio. Anyway, and you got it up?
Well, almost. I think we've got it.
Cool. So I guess a little bit of just introing into this. We brought Evan. I'm going to put you on the spot here for a second. Can you explain yourself, because James brought you in as someone that he identified as a like a quasi alt-right trollish type person, and
hey, what an introduction.
Yeah, and tell me why that's wrong.
I believe the term he used was right-wing edgelord.
Yes.
There you go.
The term he used.
And what's an edgelord, in case anybody doesn't know?
So I absolutely disagree with the term edgelord usage here, but I'll go ahead and explain. An edgelord, in my opinion, he may disagree with me here, is somebody who tries to say edgy shit, not necessarily as a provocateur, which I think where his and I definitions change. But more of like someone who just wants to appear like a tough guy. That's how I've always considered that word. But I know what James's definition is here, and I know he's talking more about just general, I guess, provocateuring, sort of trying to get a rise out of people. Other word you would use for that, I guess, is a troll.
Yes.
So I've definitely been guilty of that a few times in my life. So.
And how would you? I'm sorry, I'll cut in. And how would you define troll? Because I know that means different. That term it's used so broadly. It means different things to different people.
Sure.
What do you mean when you're saying trolling?
I think trolling. One of the things. I guess I'll just say what I'm guilty of a lot is that I will post screenshots of particular, I guess, conversations or posts, things like Tumblr that I find to be particularly egregious in the social justice realm, and it's meant to sort of make fun of those people and get a rise out of my more liberal friends. They will get upset. I guess that's the best way.
Okay. So you're an angsty person on the internet. And yeah, he's edgy. Okay.
I guess.
And I think most of us do similar things. If somebody, I took a screen cap. It wasn't my screen cap. I was shared with me a screen cap of somebody I do not like and something they were saying, and I spread that around, kind of thing, because to hold this person up for ridicule, like you say, because they said or did something that's really highly objectionable, right? And you wanted to ridicule them a little bit. So I think if that's trollish, then I guess maybe I'm a little bit trollish too. So there you go. But with regards to Charlottesville, James and I had a conversation on Monday where he was saying that the reaction from people who are, I guess, sort of deeply conservative or having certain, affinity towards the alt-right, although not necessarily a racist themselves or Nazi or white supremacist, any of this stuff, that have sort of hang around people with those kinds of leanings that we should anticipate to see, like sort of like a falling out over this killing, this murder.
Yeah, specifically, what I was saying was that, you know, the people that are the first to come to the defense of the white nationalists, the alt-right, and champion their free speech stuff, and maybe even borrow their message for a second just to push buttons and piss people off. I mean, these kinds of people get lumped in with the alt-right across the board. Hell, I'm guilty of it a little bit here with Evan. You know, like, I mean, it doesn't mean that you're a member of the alt-right. It's just something you get associated with. But the point with that is that a lot of these people, and Evan is a prime example of this, when Charlottesville, the attack happened, and people took to Facebook and started spewing their bullshit like they always do, every one of these guys that I know, every one of them jumped on the side of reason, just kicking ass and shutting people down left and right. They were trying to get a reason where say like, well, he was probably just speeding, or, you know, protesters shouldn't have been on the road, or any of these stupid fucking things. Just slap them in the face and tell them, no, look, here's what happened, here's the deal.
Yeah, I remember that one. I remember that guy. that was the most frustrating pound a head against the wall conversation I've probably had in a year.
Yeah, that was extremely frustrating. But I mean, but you were a prime example of employing logic and reason, just cutting through the bullshit and getting the real meat of what was going on.
There was stuff to talk about in that, and a lot of people I felt were coming out and saying, I don't know, just the stereotypical stupid shit of people that definitely felt their side being threatened, like if they're on the right, and it's like, oh, this is a losing moment for the right, and they got really defensive and said stupid shit like, you know, hey, they shouldn't have been on the road. Okay, well, your dipshit understanding of the right of assembly doesn't mean people deserve to die. That's the silliest thing I've heard all day long. And there was just so much of that was coming out on that day that was really.
There really was. Because some of these people are real shit people. Kind of became clear that the shit people were that immediately jumped to the side of the white nationalists. You know, like, who's probably not a white nationalist? It's probably Antifa. You know, like, oh, come on, really?
Yeah, just anything.
George Soros probably paid him to do it. I mean, just shut the fuck up.
So, you know? but for clarity, to jump in here just briefly, that what I was asking of James is that the impression he gave me of what he was saying and what he was characterizing is that, yeah, you were jumping on these people and attacking with logic, and there presumably are others like you doing the same thing, but you were not yourself, you know, a proponent of white nationalism, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong there.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So, but James, and that's to set the record straight, okay? Because we're using a lot of vague terms, all right? So you were of yourself not really of that movement, but he seemed to insist that there would be, you know, a falling out even amongst the true believers, based on what happened and based on someone, you know, getting killed, because it's not funny anymore on the internet with the Pepe the Frogs and stuff like that. It's not a joke anymore. Somebody just died. Like, is that a thing you've been seeing? Go ahead, James.
No, what I was trying to say there, I think you're back on track with that, but what I was trying to pitch there was this idea that I think you're going to see the popularity of the white nationalists, the willingness of people to defend them in their right to speech and everything of that nature is going to dwindle. I think you're going to see their numbers start to split up a little bit. I mean, somebody died. You know, like, this is serious. And they were murdered. Many people were injured. This was a clusterfuck from the get-go all weekend long. Like, this protest was a disaster for both sides. And for Antifa, it was a disaster for them, too. I mean, I think what you're going to see with nationalism, I think this is going to be the start of their downfall. The popularity is going to start to decrease.
Do you, Evan? Chris, go ahead.
So I raised this the other day. I was talking with some friends. You know, I'm no fan of thing of that sort, but I wonder, you know, in that crowd, was there a very vocal and violent minority along with a bunch of people who thought they were there for rational reasons, or was it really just a crowd full of either avowed white supremacists or wannabe white supremacists?
I can answer that. there was a big misconception that this Charlottesville rally was based around, and it did start with the removal of that Robert E. Lee statue. But if you look at any of the marketing that was put out for the Unite the Right rally, it was very clearly a white supremacist, come one, come all type of invitation. And if you look at any of the videos, what they were doing, the things they were chanting, it's pretty clear that if you were going to this event on that side, you were there to support white nationalism. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, it wasn't even an issue, in my opinion. I mean, from what I've seen, like looking at these media marketing materials, I mean, Vanguard America was one of the white nationalist groups there. They were passing out shields with their logos on. Like, and they had hundreds of those. They were just handing them out to people. Fields Jr., the murderer, was pictured with one of those Vanguard America shields. And then Vanguard America, of course, jumps out and says, well, we don't know that guy. He's not a member of us. We were passing them out to people. But,
and that's one of the things that I wanted to check on. If we were going to have somebody who was there, Bradley, a friend of James, was actually there in Charlottesville. And I sort of wanted to check on, the veracity of some of these things. There's a lot of claims flying around about, what exactly happened. He got to see some of this. I don't know if he saw those clashes in particular or what his experience was. But stay tuned because we're going to interview him on the podcast for that. But yeah, back to what you were saying, James. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Actually, I was kind of agreeing with Evan. I looked at all the marketing material. I stay on these mailers. I get emails and things from the far left, the far right. I subscribe to all of that shit just to see what they're saying and what they're doing. I follow every politician I possibly can on Facebook to see what they say and what they do. And everything that came from Unite the Right that I saw, email invitations, things of that nature, I can go back and find them if I need to. But every one of those was point blank clear this is a white nationalist rally. Like, you were there as a friggin' Nazi, essentially, or KKK or something like that.
Right. So that would make that makes the idea that these guys were coming to defend a statue of Robert E. Lee is a exactly. Bullshit pretense, essentially. I don't have a kinder term for it.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Anybody else have any thoughts on that, Melissa, Chris?
Any thoughts on the premise of the event? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, does it seem like there's a consensus there that pretty much no, they were coming to march for white nationalism versus because we've gotten into the whole conversation about defending Confederate monuments and statues and things like that. But that would you agree that it's probably not really about that? That maybe be a separate conversation.
Oh no, I would wholeheartedly say that wasn't the issue at hand. I think that it's become kind of a tangent issue in the aftermath of the events, but I don't think that was a precipitating event or the precipitating cause of the event.
I agree. I think that was just a rallying point more than anything.
But I think the real issue that why we ask about this and why it's coming in here is yesterday President Trump did his, off-script little question and answer where he specifically praised some of the people on the right that were at this event, saying, there were plenty of good people there who were sure very nice or something like that. They were just there to protest a statue.
He said there were good people on both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, he said very nice people on both sides. There were plenty of people there to just protest this statue, which is demonstrably false. I mean, no one thought that. I mean, I wish there was a way to go into the mind of all 500 or so of these people who showed up and say, hey, why are you here? Because clearly it's a white nationalist thing. No one's there with, being respectful and trying to do some silent protest about the removal of the statue. They're there to say, you won't replace
to
us.
Chant, blood and soil,
Blood and soil.
Right.
Well, see this, though, and I'm very much being a devil's advocate here because, based in Texas, I deal with these fine people all the time, but if a guy shows up and he is a white supremacist, but he's not violent and doesn't participate in violence, do we automatically lump him into the category of bad person?
Are you a white supremacist? If you are a white
no.
He's cutting out real bad. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part of what you were saying.
if we have someone who holds white nationalist beliefs, but they're not violent, they don't participate in violence, do we automatically make the moral judgment and say they're bad people? Now, I know that sounds kind of silly, but I deal with people all the time that they're not avowed white supremacists per se, but they hold beliefs that certainly could be considered culturalist or classist or maybe even racist, but that I know them to be good.
I would say they were misinformed before I'd say they were a bad person.
Misinformed is a very generous term there. I believe that the white race is superior to other races, even if you don't believe they need to be extinct or wiped out, but you believe in keeping the white line pure and the purity of white.
Is it not a misinformed opinion?
Yeah, but I also think it's something that's brought into you with your core. If you are capable of reason and reached the age of, majority, where you should be smart enough at this point to realize that you're just wrong. That is dumb.
Yeah.
Or bad.
I think there's something to be said for perception in this as well. I mean, there's a lot of people out there on the right that do get called white supremacists. I mean, James, you saw me get called a Nazi at least 2 or 3 times this weekend when I was, very clearly not supporting any sort of white supremacy or Nazi agenda or whatever they want to call it. But it's a very easy go-to for describe somebody that is, let's guess, a little more right-leaning. That'll happen sometimes. And I don't know if that's who Chris is referring to, maybe. I'm not sure.
It sounded like, and we'll have to wait for him to come back to clarify or maybe correct, but it sounded like he was saying that somebody he might otherwise know as a good person who ascribes to, white superiority, essentially, or racist, or racist ideology. That's a tough one. I mean, the comparison I've heard is, well, I'm sure, some of the SS officers that worked the gas chambers were loving parents and, were doting fathers to their children, and went to church on Sundays. Like,
also people are capable of expressing, decent moral opinions or having some decent moral view of any other issue. But the fact that you see the world through a lens where you believe your race is superior is a fundamental flaw. I mean, there's no cover until you can fix that from your worldview.
Can I pitch in a little bit on that?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Just speaking from family perspective, there are people that are still living in my family that are of older generations. We're talking 70, 80 years older. And I'm not excusing their beliefs, but I will have to say that the day and age in which they were raised, they held some very racist opinions and beliefs. Now, but in doing so, no one that in my family that held those beliefs ever treated any person from other races as inferior. They never said, they never called them an N-word. They never, they didn't do things that people today would not do.
Nothing to antagonize them directly.
Well, but the thing about it is, they were jovial and friendly and appreciated, their time, but they weren't going to go out of their way and say, come over to my house for dinner. But if they were Christians, they weren't going to be a dickhead about it. So, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to give someone a pass for being a white supremacist, but what I'm saying is there are still some people, and not even necessarily that generation, but some of their children that have been raised in that mindset that may, for lack of better education, don't know otherwise. I don't want to paint with that broad of brush and say that if you have white supremacist beliefs, then you're an asshole. You may just, like, that's why I said they're misinformed. Maybe they don't know any better because they're exposed to any better.
Sure.
Would you say it's... Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Evan.
Would you say it's fair to say that they're an asshole for their beliefs? I think this is something that Daniel was popping off, or actually, I'm sorry, James was popping off, which was that, sure, you could probably be a great person. These people do have communities, right? They do work together, and they're not 100%, that's not all they do, right? That they right? They have to go grocery shopping. They got to be nice to the cashier. They got to tip their server, you know, that kind of thing. So they could probably hold a lot of really cool things, but the fact that if someone's a white supremacist and I don't know it, I'm never going to know it. But if you're willing to, if your Saturday looks like I'm driving cross country to go to Charlottesville, Virginia to hold up a tiki torch I bought at Home Depot and scream White Lives Matter all night long, you're probably a fucking idiot and I don't have anything to do with you.
And Evan,
see, I was worried we weren't going to get along, Evan.
that's the kind of people that I'm referring to, though. I mean, no one.
Sure,
and I know exactly what you're getting at, Melissa. And I was going to say that I am sure that on a totality of the circumstances, these are good people. But again, it's a very slippery slope because what happens when one of these people runs to be a county commissioner, for example, or a state representative of the 64th district of the state of Tennessee in the General Assembly, for example? If you were to be in one of these positions, I'm sure you're capable of making very rational decisions about all kinds of stuff. But you're also going to be totally fine with the idea of, say, gerrymandering or voter discrimination because you believe these people are less than you. You believe their vote doesn't count. Hell, you don't want them to vote. You know, I mean, that's the dangers. It really erodes society when they're allowed to have these beliefs. When people don't educate them, when their family members just say, "Oh, Uncle Cooter's just old, no big deal." You know, no, you need to go up to Uncle Cooter and say, "Uncle Cooter, you're fucking wrong here, bro. Like, you can't do this."
That's very true, James. That's a valid point. But the problem with that is you are presuming that the person that needs to be educated is willing to be educated.
Yeah, that's always the problem. Go ahead.
I think your moral position is a decent human being to at least make the attempt.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Over and over again, every time you hear them say something like that, no, call it out for what it is. Say no. I do this all of the time on Facebook in these conversations where someone will get into even a semi-racist rant or something that starts going off the rails of being like entering the realm of racism, and I'll say, no, you misunderstand the concept and we need to talk about it. Here's the deal. And then I get met with all kinds of backlash about how I'm a PC Nazi and blah blah blah, and I'm just like, well, look, it's fucking important, and my only obligation here is to point it out to you and explain it. And after that, go on about your happy racist bullshit.
But bringing it back to Chris's original question, though, does ascribing to these beliefs make you a bad person? I mean, there's, you know, at some point you have to do, you know, moral calculus, right? As to, you know, what your behaviors are, what your beliefs are. You know, if you're letting bad things inform your decisions, you're going to be making bad decisions. More, James, you touched on it. You know, what if this person's a county commissioner? You know, what if this person, you know, if this informs the way you act in the world? I'm sorry, what are you saying?
I was repeating that, or if they were in the position of maybe being the 64th district in the General Assembly.
We're not going there tonight because we're not going there tonight.
No, you're not. I'd rather not.
Yeah.
Well, how about this then? So we're asking, do you have to be a bad person to be a white nationalist? And I'm going to argue.
That's actually a better way of phrasing it. That's a much better way of phrasing it. Do you have to be a bad person to be a white nationalist?
And I'm gonna answer that question with the answer no, and I'm gonna look back at history a little bit here. I don't think that one thing alone. Let's say you're a white nationalist, but you're not gonna do anything with it, right? You're just a white nationalist. Inside, you believe that white people are better. Well, you're a fucking asshole, in my opinion, just for thinking that for that reason. But you can still go on to do great things. I mean, we can look back at, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., who was against gay marriage. We consider people against gay marriage to be not so great people, but look at what cool things he did. Look at all the great things he accomplished, right?
And I think that's a very valid point, actually. I mean, as far as, you know, people have also said, where does this go next? Are they tearing down statues of Washington or Jefferson because they're slaveholders?
But I think there's a difference here, though, because I think we're, you know, maybe being a little too considering of presentism. You know, when we look back on, or not being presentist, that when we're looking back on Martin Luther King, where he was in that time, how you know, poorly homosexuality was accepted at that time, and to being so sort of avant-garde, you know, on race and these other things. Like you said, he did a lot of other cool things. You're right. He wasn't there yet. You know.
I can tell you how to fix this one. Not only was Martin Luther King against gay marriage, Martin Luther King also cheated on his wife notoriously.
Right.
So
yeah.
that would be a better example.
Yeah, he's not a perfect human being at all. You know, he did things that were demonstrably, you know, bad, immoral. You know, I get that. The difference is today, and this is where I'm going to stand on it. The difference is today, for someone to still hold on to white nationalist ideas, there's no, oh, well, that was the time, that was, people didn't know better, people were more tribalistic. You don't have a fucking excuse to be a white nationalist. And I don't think it's 2017. You know, this is shit. You know, we fought wars over this stuff, you know, decades ago. To me, there's not really an excuse. It's rationally, morally indefensible. And if you hold that position anyway, then you are an asshole. You know, in perhaps more totality than just having a single bad idea because, you know, society hasn't moved forward yet.
And I think that's actually a great point, because really it does kind of harken back to World War II and the Holocaust and the atrocities against pretty much anybody who wasn't white and able-bodied. You know, I mean, if you were gay, if you were Catholic, if you were
had a disability,
if you had a disability of any kind, if your bloodline wasn't seen as white,
they try to commit genocide against deaf people. That doesn't work because it's not, you know, you don't inherit it generally.
And I think it becomes the rallying cry of that stark moment of never again, you know, never, and it draws the line. After that point, moving forward, the fact that we even had to have the civil rights movements, and we still had segregation. I mean, that is fucking atrocious that we even had to do that. But looking back at it from the point we are now in 2017, no, it's really not forgivable to white nationalists. I don't care how nice of a person you are. You could cure cancer. I'm still going to look at you and call you an asshole. Oh, thank you for curing cancer. But,
you're still a prick. Yeah.
If you cure cancer, dude, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care, dude. That's awesome.
But what's the point of that?
Let's not get sidetracked on what other good things they might have done. Stick to the...
Exactly, and that's the point. Is I think it's really, when we're asking about it, and there's a moral calculus, as you said, I think you're multiplying by a factor of 0. Every time you bring in white nationalism, the 0 factor. You're right back to, no, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me ask you this. Let me circle back here for a minute, because this is kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
People that I know that I feel like are, that you and I both would probably call racist, they don't really see people of other races as biologically inferior. I almost prefer the term culturalist, because these people grew up in, you know, lily white 1950s America, where they remember harmonious and happy times if you were a white male. And what they see is they see cultures they don't understand. They see, you know, black actors shooting cops. So it's not a matter of them disliking black people because they're black. It's they fear the culture. They fear the urbanist trend of that culture. You know, they fear the. I hesitate to say this because I get called out on this all the time. But you know, the how, in some ways, there's the embracing of the thug mentality by some. So it's not a biologically inferior thing like we've seen in the past, as much as it is a cultural thing. That's why I question whether these people ought to automatically be bad people, because armed or ignorant might be a better way to put some of them, because I think it's not that they hate anyone, it's just they don't like people acting like fools.
I'll say if that's the case, then I think the best word to use would be horrible at communication. Because, and I don't mean that to be like a snappy response.
I still feel like that was a generous term.
Yeah, I feel like if that's the thing, and there are people like that, and I think they get lumped in, but I think those people, like we said before, if you're the kind of person that's going to hold a belief that you know, I'm a proud white nationalist, and you're going to own that, there's no way you're missing what these people are saying that you're following. There's no way you're missing it, and if you lie with dogs, you're going to get fleas.
No, I agree. I agree. And I'm kind of taking those people out of this conversation, because I feel like the true white nationalists, people who are non-white as biologically inferior, is not a very big majority, not a majority at all, not a very big group anymore.
But
and let me give you my own personal experience. I grew up in a very, very white think we had maybe one African American kid in my school and a few Hispanic kids. Now I live in an area that's probably at least 50, maybe 70% African American. There's a lot of displaced Katrina people that show. And when I first moved to this area, I was uncomfortable.
Are you in?
I would think. Do what?
Are you in Houston?
Dallas, I think.
Texas.
Chris, we're losing you, buddy.
Yeah, there's a lot of like clicking and cracking on the feed. I don't know who that's coming from.
Well, and I think let's go back to what you're saying, Chris. I get what you're saying. I do. I totally understand it. And I think that it's a little bit natural to have an aversion to change. And I think that as we get older, we do have a lot more aversion to change. You know, like things that we don't understand, things that we're not really into, you know, that seem strange to us, and we think, oh, fuck that, I'm not going to do that. You know, like, I don't want to do that. And that exists. But at the same time, you're also capable of reasoning. You need to do some introspection in this situation and say, you know, it's not my business. I need to stay out of it. And I get, you know, increased crime rate or something like that. Well, stay frosty. Keep your head on the swivel. You know, that's a whole other thing. But just as far as like just not liking something about a different culture, you know, this is America. You got to get over it, bud. You know, like for anybody in the population, that's just the way it is.
I don't think what Chris is describing is white nationalism.
No, it's not. It's not. He's talking about
What he's talking about. Hang on, if I can chime in. What he's talking about sounds like not so much white nationalism, but racial grievance. And you said, you know, cultural. You know, that they don't like this culture, they don't like that culture. But when you tie culture, you know, intrinsically to ethnicity, it's still racism. You know, we've just rebranded that a slightly different way. That it's like, oh, it's not just because, you know, his skin color is black. It's because of thug culture and that hip hop music. You know, and you hit on all these things that are you know, considered normative to the ethnicity. You know, it's a distinction without a difference, really. And you know, these are people who don't think of themselves as, you know, as racists, right? You know, like you said, I think someone said earlier that you just don't like, you know, just don't like stupid behavior or you know, what have you. But if you're still tying the ethnicity to the culture in a way that I think is pretty unfair, making sort of normative judgments on extreme behaviors or a minority of whatever population, it's still racism. You don't think of it as racism, but that's what it is. Like, just because you're not flying the N-word every, you know, fourth or fifth word, like, it doesn't mean you're not a racist.
Church. I mean, you just nailed 10%. If I could make that a soundbite and play it over and over again, I was used to educate people. That's exactly what I've been saying forever, is that the fact that you even take aspects of a culture, dominantly one ethnicity or another, and apply it to the ethnicity across the board, that is racist.
Yeah.
It's the definition of racism. It's an institutionalized way of doing things. It creates a wholesale problem out of an individual like issue.
But I'll add this. I think what Chris is saying, Chris, when you mentioned that you moved where you were and you felt a little uncomfortable, I don't think that's racism. I think that, I mean, if it is, it's very harmless racism. I think it's just you having a culture shock, which we've all had at some point in our lives where we were like, oh shit, this is my first time in like this kind of neighborhood. And I don't know.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a little different. You don't know where the exits are. You don't know what to do or how to compose yourself, and you feel a little awkward. You feel out of place. I don't think that's. I mean, if it is racism, I think it's very harmless racism and not really.
I wouldn't call that racism. It's, you know, if, you know, I've heard other people make this comparison. If you are in a room full of people that are all different from you, and you're the only one. If you're the only white person in a room, let's say full of black people, that there's 100 black people in a room, you're the only white person in the room, you're going to be super fucking aware of that, and most people are going to be a little bit uncomfortable. That's not necessarily racism. And the opposite is true. The opposite is true. If you're the only black person in a room full of 100 white people, you're going to be just as uncomfortable. That's not necessarily racism.
Well, let me tell you the other day that was kind of, this is a little bit of a funny story, but I was driving down the road and I saw a guy driving like a 1988 or 1990 like grandma car with like 5,000 worth of rims on the thing. I thought, that's just stupid. Well, I got home and I'm on Facebook and we're talking about something that was tweeted and somebody defended the tweet by saying, "This is you white people don't understand black humor. Like we don't understand why y'all kiss your dog." Now it was a focused comment. My dog every day. You know, if me kissing my dog, something that's natural, seems so weird as somebody with a $5 car and $5,000 rims. It was a little bit of an eye opener. Things that I think are probably very normative, kissing my dog. For some people, they're like, "Why the fuck are you kissing your dog? That's weird," you know. So it was a little bit of an introspective moment.
Issue of practicality. I mean, yes, the $5 car and $5,000 rims. I'll never understand as a person who's somewhat fiscally conservative, at least. Even not in my, not necessarily in my personal life, because Jasmina can spend money. But
I've seen your car. You can spend money.
Yeah, I like money and I like spending.
But is it really that different though? Hang on. Is it really that different though than someone who has a $60,000 truck and they live in like a trailer? Like.
Oh no, it's not different. It's the same shit.
But we always think about the rims though, don't we? We always think about the rims and the spinners.
Yes, exactly, and that's what it is. Is if you're taking something that is an individual example, one piece of anecdotal evidence, and you are applying it to an ethnicity as a whole in your head, whether you need to do it or not.
Yeah.
And these black people have stupid fucking rims. You know, no, it's that one black person and their stupid fucking rims, not the whole ethnicity. I mean, you know, but it's a natural reaction. What I was going to go, I'm going to get a little nerdy with a little psychoanalysis and some dairy dog. The essence of consciousness, like what you understand and how you interpret the world and how you see everything, boils down to negation. You identify who you are based on what you are not and what you interact with that's different. So it is perfectly natural to recognize that you're a different race from somebody else. That person doesn't look like me. That person isn't me. Oh, what the hell? Evan's here.
Yeah, Evan's.
Sorry, I figured since I didn't realize my camera wasn't on the whole time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought it turned off for different reasons. Yeah, exactly. So we come up with negation. Negation is how we see the world. So you do see differences between people, and you do apply them to some ethnicities in some ways. But you also have reason, and you can rise above that simply by thinking about the situation for like 10 seconds and just being like, "Well, hey, no, I'm doing something stupid here." You know, like.
I wonder how many people don't get there. I wonder how many people get stuck at the negation part. You know, they don't necessarily intend to want to be racist, but they're not enlightened enough to make the hop from, "Hey, that thought you just had is stupid."
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and that is when what Melissa was talking about earlier about Uncle Cooter or whatever, and he's just a kooky old man, not racist. And I was saying that it is your moral obligation to correct these people and to point out to them, not disrespectfully, but just to say, "Hey, Uncle Cooter, you know, you're stuck in the negation phase. You need to think about this from a different aspect. Like, bro, you live on, you know, disability checks. You're no different. The government supports you. What are you talking about?" You know, like.
I think it's very important if you're going to correct somebody on that kind of matter that you do it in a way that they can agree with, because otherwise you're going to just. I mean, when people are challenged, especially up front in the very aggressive, not even really aggressive, but anything they can identify as condescending or a passive-aggressive way, they're not going to really see your side no matter what you say. They're going to dig their heels in that much deeper on their side, and that's a natural human reaction to a lot of things as well.
Do those when even if you do so a lot of the times in a way that is straightforward and not rude, they'll blow the fuck up about it, especially white people. Use terms like racism directed at them, but not saying they're racist, and like clarifying, I'm not saying you're racist, but what you're doing is racism. Like you're in the realm of racism. They lose their shit. And Black Lives Matter this, or you know, like, well, what about Obama? You know, like, what about this?
Yeah, the whataboutisms and.
They get their heels in and become.
One more time.
Oh, that actually,
right.
For a fun tradition, if nobody minds on this though, because we're going to beat this horse to death. Evan, I wanted to ask you specifically, because I've never heard you talk about it. What are your thoughts on BLM versus white nationalists?
Well, my thoughts on, dude, I don't compare them at all. They're two very, very different things in my mind, especially. But I'll give you my thoughts on BLM, because everybody, I mean, the thoughts on white nationalists are pretty universal. The thoughts on BLM kind of starts spreading out, and I think they have a good heart. A lot of these people that are BLM, and they're very hard to nail down. So I'm going to speak very generally. I'm sure plenty of you will find holes in what I'm about to say. I'm not a super smart dude. I didn't prepare for this whatsoever. So I think what started out is probably people getting emotional reactions to some viral videos, some viral news that goes about a couple of trials that look kind of sketchy and this and that, and they have very emotional reactions, and I feel like they find their reality and their truth and their perspective, and there's nothing you can say to get them out of that. And I don't agree with a lot of things BLM says. I don't know. There's so much to unpack there. I don't know where to begin. Could you give me a more specific question? I'm sorry.
Sure. Most, I guess, as specifically as I can be on that. What I'm wondering is, how do you, especially on the right, because I mean, normally I'm pretty much
sure.
Melissa comes to me with me occasionally, and she's on the right as well. But normally I'm like the black player in this group of people that has right-leaning thoughts and positions. How do you feel about BLM? I guess. Do you believe that their message is racist? Do you believe that their message is violent? Do you think they encourage riots and behavior like this? Like the stuff we saw at Charlottesville with the white nationalists. Do you feel BLM is on that same level, I guess, in terms of pushing the bounds of free speech, into inciting violence, into inciting crime?
I don't think BLM is as violent as, say, Antifa. And I don't think that their purpose is to be violent like Antifa's is or white nationalists sort of are. But I don't think. Do what?
You believe the organization is racist?
I don't believe the organization is racist because I don't think that they're just all one organization. There's so many different chapters with so many different leaderships and so many different things. It's really hard to pin down. Like when you say they, I can't say overall. How about this? I'll take some talking points. I think if you think that black people are better than white people, you're racist. And I don't think all of BLM says that, but I've heard people that are on BLM that would fly the BLM flag that would say racist things about white people.
Have you looked at the BLM website, though? Like, I looked at the BLM website today because I was curious. It's
sure.
not very ambiguous. I mean, like, one thing, for example, says their goal is to promote black business.
Sure.
Not say that's not. I mean, I get why they say that. I'm not saying that that's not rational in their lives, but I mean, you know, if we're gonna.
Chris, if I may, if I'm correct on this, Chris, are you saying essentially that had that been reversed and it said we support white businesses, that would immediately someone would say that's racist? And
yeah.
So is that how you're drawing the connection there?
I mean, yes, maybe. Maybe the logic doesn't fall through, but yeah, I mean.
I'll follow through with that. I think if you can replace any sentence that says white people or Jews or whatever it is, and replace that with black people or Muslims or whatever you have, then and it sounds prejudiced and racist to you, then it's fucking prejudiced and racist when you say it with the other people's, the other races.
So is that's a huge conversation, John.
Yeah, and guys, just to jump in quickly here, we got to remember. Yeah, sorry. We're trying to keep this conversation focused on Charlottesville and BLM was there, but not so much about BLM versus white nationalists as white nationalists versus Antifa and the violence that happens there. And is there an equivalency? I think would probably be a better question with regards to those two groups than BLM, because I think we could have a whole separate show on BLM, and I don't want to get too much further into that tonight. But
yeah, I was trying to grab Evan for that. Now that leads me to another question.
You did make some good points, Evan, though, and that's definitely something worth revisiting.
Sure, absolutely. Sometime.
Sure.
This is actually something I was curious about. If anyone has seen anything about this, was BLM at Charlottesville? Like, was there a BLM presence? As far as
I didn't see any marketing.
I didn't either, and I keep hearing about BLM, and I think the president talked about it briefly in his address yesterday, saying something about BLM and Antifa or something like that. I never saw anything about BLM. I've heard people.
I think I've heard it suggested as well that BLM and Antifa were both there, counter protesting.
There were signs. I think people saw BLM signs.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what it was.
Which I'll offer. Hang on. I'll offer that I've been to protests that were not BLM protests when people were chanting, Black Lives Matter, and it wasn't a BLM protest at all. So I don't know if that association was brought in just because of that slogan, or if there was an actual official or unofficial presence by Black Lives Matter members, proponents. I don't know how you exactly quantified membership.
I'm not saying they weren't there. What I'm saying is I haven't seen anything that would suggest that they were there in like an official organized capacity. Because there's no leader, right? It's just like if you show up and you say I'm BLM. What were you gonna say, James? Sorry.
There are organizational members. I believe it is actually now a registered organization of some sort. So there are obviously leaders. There's some kind of corporate structure or nonprofit corporate structure or something.
Yeah, if you go on their website, they have an overall structure and an official message. Yeah.
And so I mean, it is an organized group theoretically, but I do get the point that they are all that. But again, we're getting back to BLM, and I was just trying to pitch that idea. But I guess where do we want to go as far as Charlottesville goes with this, David? Because I kind of touched on the idea of my internet troll friends, especially Evan. Again, it's terrible to call you an internet troll because you're really not.
Thanks.
You're really not really an internet troll. I mean,
see, he completely misrepresented you. I mean, it was Monday was a total straw man of what you are.
Let's be fair. I want to be fair to James in that, and this is a character flaw of mine. When you see me online, you see a much different version of me in person. I get this all the time in person. I'm real nice. I'm gonna use quotation marks. But people tend to enjoy me more in person than online. I tend to, if I'm sitting around alone and bored, one of the things that I definitely find enjoyment in is, just kind of stirring the pot, starting shit.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, and I say that not like in a proud way. Like I wouldn't put it on a resume. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Definitely, it's definitely a character flaw, but I know where James comes from. I know where he gets that perception.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to qualify that just in general. I've never seen you get overboard or be an asshole to people, like straight up. Really, this is not like the South Park caricature of trolls or something like that. Like you're not over here like telling people they're fat sluts and they need to kill themselves.
Evan, did you kill Kenny? You killed Kenny.
No, I didn't kill Kenny. He killed himself.
It's funny that you say this about what you're really like in person. It's because Melissa, the first time Melissa and I did not get along well when we just talked to each other on Facebook. I think the very first thing she ever said to me when she saw me in person is that I was much less terrifying in person. And I was a little bit disappointed. But I took her meaning well. Because that's how it is, and this is why we ferment, y'all.
This is why we ferment, y'all.
This is why we ferment, because we need to humanize each other, because the internet we're all guilty of it to some extent, the scoring points and insincerity and being logic pedants and what have you. Like most of us do it to some extent. It doesn't really help move anything forward.
I think it's really easy to do it when you're on a keyboard and that person's not standing in front of you.
Exactly.
And it's so much easier to just kind of lay into someone and call them a fucking idiot because you think they're being a fucking idiot. And in person, it's like, oh, well, if I call them a fucking idiot, I'm really harshing the vibe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it could go poorly. You don't know.
Around you if you pull that shit in person, but online it's like, oh well, I mean, people are in and out, and it doesn't really matter. It's what what it feels like. I mean, obviously, we see here like the way James introduced me to you. Obviously, that didn't come from nowhere.
Right? No, I understand. And
a great introduction.
most of us have reputations, you know. Or not, I wouldn't say most of us. Many of us. I know I do. I know James does. You know, have reputations of being very odious. You know, in our you know our online interactions on occasion.
I lose patience quickly. I lose patience so fast.
Yeah, and I think the thing is based on what I do. I've learned to have patience. I don't have patience naturally. It's just that I've gotten to the point where my soul is broken enough that I can actually shut up for a second, just listen and let somebody talk. But, you know, like, okay.
Gotcha.
And there's the sword. You know, like, I win it.
So, but let's bring it back again. Bring it back to Charlottesville and what happened. And the reason, one of the reasons you were brought on again, you were not what James presented you to be, as I understand it, or not quite.
Sure.
To an extent, but not quite. That he hang on.
Join my really hate group. You'll see me in action exactly.
I know what it looks like. I'm not really curious about it anymore. That he held the belief. Let's get into this. He held the belief that there was going to be a negative reaction, not just from people like you, but from actual alt-right individuals, based on the fact that a woman was murdered, you know, this past weekend, and that's gonna sort of be, you know, signaling, an abandonment of the movement to some extent. We lost Chris.
And I think you're going to see that. I mean, I will see this again. I think you're going to see it, man. The people who help champion them, the people they depend on, the actually rational people who champion free speech, are leaving the ship. I mean, no.
But a trollish champion of free speech and someone who is alt-right are not the same person. Okay? So where does it come that alt-right is going to lose steam over this murder? That's what I want to know.
I think so.
I so doubt it.
I don't think so. Because I don't think so because we always want to separate the cop shooter from Black Lives Matter, the radical Muslim terrorist from Islam. The people on the left have, you know, we separate violence from the group. So I agree with Evan. I don't think so at all.
No, I mean, look, you need to look no further than go to 4chan's poll and go to r/thedonald to see what the alt-right narrative is right now. And it's, look, Antifa was violent. Why is nobody fucking talking about them? And they're going to push that shit because one of the things the alt-right feels, and one of the things that the alt-right, how it came about was a feeling of persecution, and this is their bread and fucking butter. Like, they are going to push this shit. That's all they're talking about. Go to Donald right now.
They got Donald Trump to join their message.
Yeah.
They're happy. The president is espousing their bullshit.
Yeah,
that's what
they're happy because they feel like the media and the public at large has sort of painted them as villains, and this is the perfect example. Look, we're getting this treatment right now, and look who's not, the Antifa and their left. So that's all they're talking about. That's all they're talking about.
They're getting that treatment because it's well fucking deserved. I mean, white nationalists should be called out.
James, you're missing the point. You're missing the point. The point is, you said on Monday that you think that this is going to hurt their movement. That people are going to abandon the movement essentially of white nationalism over a murder perpetrated by one person. I don't understand why. That's what I'm challenging you on.
I agree with the white nationalism comment because we talked about this earlier about how there's is alt-right white nationalism, and I really feel like there's a lot of people that would call themselves alt-right or who were part of the alt-right when it first came out that would not consider themselves white nationalists. I think the white nationalist movement might see a hit here, but alt-right in general, like post Pepe the Frogs, those people are going wild.
Oh yeah,
I mean, is it fair to conflate those two, the alt-right and white supremacists? I mean, I wonder if that's even a mistake if we're trying to criticize the white supremacists, though. To lump them in together.
Look, there are white supremacists who are alt-right.
How would a person here's my understanding of it. When the alt-right first started, there were people who were not necessarily white supremacists or racists that identified with that. But if that has become the normative term to mean, if you were saying you are alt-right, you are identifying with white nationalism, that normatively that there's no distinction. Now, maybe in the beginning, in the the etymological roots of the term alt-right was not necessarily tied, but I think it is now. I mean, and that's why I know people who said, "Well, I used to consider myself alt-right, but seeing what it is now, I would never call myself that."
Okay, let me give some context. Can I do this real quick? This is
Sure.
a bit of history on what alt-right is, because I've been kind of following them for a long time. And really, if you go back to the very beginning of when the alt-right started, it definitely started around Pohl and a certain character named Milo Yiannopoulos, right? That kind of crowd.
Oh,
right.
Spencer and Bright in general.
I wouldn't say Richard Spencer yet. Hold on. So the very, very beginning, I feel like the alt-right came about as people that were really tired of presenting conservative viewpoints and being called racist. So they decided, you know what, let's just kick it into high gear and just troll these people, right?
Yeah.
And just make these people angry because we're sick and fucking tired of being treated like shit by these people. And so they go about it, and they start doing their Pepe the Frog memes, and they start calling people cucks, and they're doing all that. And then Mr. Richard Spencer shows up. And that guy, certified white nationalist, says that he's coining the term the alt-right. And at this point, we're looking at like, did he really coin it? Who the fuck knows? But he definitely claims that he coined it. And at that point, we start seeing this turn to where people are really starting to put on the racism a little bit. Because now Richard Spencer's involved. His crew is starting to plow into this alt-right people. They're starting to pull into the same message boards. And I feel like at that point, there's that divide of where people that were really there just because they don't like SJWs and they don't like hardcore progressive people. And that was, that's who I feel the original and real alt-right is. And, you can disagree or agree. But, and then there's the people that came in, kind of took the name, and then we had Hillary Clinton call them the racists that they are. And I think the media took that. And I think that's where the conflation between these two groups comes from.
Right, but my question
and I forgot what the hell my point was.
Well, you're explaining the nuance of how it came about.
Does that hurt the process, though, of really stamping out this racist white nationalist? Because I know lots of Trump supporters who I guess are technically alt-right that aren't racist at all. They don't like white supremacists. I just wonder if lumping, is allowing that conflation really kind of making too much of a blanket generalization about people who really shouldn't be lumped in there.
Well, I think part of the issue with the alt-right, too, is even from the get-go, the idea was pushback. The idea was pushback against liberal PC culture and kind of intentionally inflaming these people to show them how ridiculous they are. That was their thing. It always comes from a right side, like a conservative political point, but the issue with it is even when they weren't racist or something like that in general, their responses did almost always hold some kind of bigotry or something that comes, and this is what I was talking about earlier, something that's based on almost a flawed presumption, like a logical fallacy from the get-go. I can't tell if they actually know it's fallacious or if they just put it out there to see if the liberals can catch it. And it seems like they push that message to be ridiculous. And then when you actually see them in person, like Milo, I mean, they know they're ridiculous. They accept they're ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they've done a really piss poor job of distancing themselves, as they really should have, from the white nationalist movement when Richard Spencer came on board. I mean, we didn't really see any pushback from alt-right communities such as Pohl and McDonald and r/alt-right.
Well, how about
almost none?
Steve Bannon? I mean, these people are also white nationalists or associate with white nationalists. Like they're easy to lump them together. I mean,
it really, really is. And like the way I was phrasing it earlier, I did want to give that distinction, but at the end of the day, James, you're right. They have done a very piss poor job of not separating themselves from these truly shitty people, and they're going to pay for it, like we are seeing right now.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's even got Trump now at this point after yesterday's speech. I mean, you are going to see this pushback. I mean, people are pissed off that you're not separating yourself from these white nationalists hard enough. I mean, like, you've got to do it. You can't mollycoddle them and just kind of sit along and throw the line.
But James, let me ask you this, James, because I've heard this for years. Is asking someone on the alt-right to assertively distance themselves from white nationalists any different than people on the right asking Muslims to assertively distance themselves from terrorists? Because I've heard for years people say that peace-loving Muslims shouldn't have to say anything. To say anything because they didn't do anything wrong.
They shouldn't, but at the same time, if you were to ask them to, the overwhelming response is, hell yeah, those people suck. That's like asking a white person, well, how do you feel about this racist shit? My response is, that's garbage, man. Get these people out of my face. And yes, if you see someone on the street corner espousing some racist bullshit like that, and you ask them to stop and they won't, I'm kind of okay with you punching them. I'm just saying, like, I'm not a real fan of these people. I don't advocate violence against them, but I could understand why you would strike somebody in that situation.
I'm not a fan of them either. I'm just really being a devil's advocate more than anything. I think that there's no room for white supremacism in this country. It burns me up that nearly 200 years after the end of the Civil War, we have to argue about what the damn war was about. People that I hear from people all the time, either, well, so-and-so had slaves, or slavery would have died out on its own. I don't care. Slavery's wrong. It's always been wrong. Yeah. I don't care if the founding fathers had slaves or they didn't have slaves. No one said they were perfect, but they didn't secede from the Union and fight a war so they could maintain slavery as part of their whole economic thing. Well, of course, I'm with you. I get frustrated having to rehash the Civil War every 6 or 8 months because somebody with a Confederate flag shows up on TV.
Yeah, I fully understand what you're saying there, and it's also the same connection to this bullshit about states' rights as the cause of the Civil War. Yes, it was a states' rights issue. Guess what the right was? The right of the states to own slaves and maintain slave-owning laws. Yeah, that was the states' right that we were concerned with. Is can the federal government declare slavery illegal?
Yeah. Well, the analogy I use for that, and a modern-day analogy, is if we went to war over a state's right to legalize abortion, would we say that the war was over states' rights? No, we would say the war was over abortion. We've been verbally fighting a war about abortion since Roe versus Wade and before that.
Yeah.
So, I get really ticked off when people try. Our revisionist historians drive me crazy, and I get a little bit into it, but
this leads us back to those.
I don't think anybody's qualified to talk about what the Civil War is about unless they're a fucking history major. I'm so tired of hearing people talk about it on either side. To be honest, people that are. Do what? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, nothing. I was talking to myself. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I hear from both sides. It's about this. It's about that. I would really love to sit down and talk to somebody who's like an actual expert in the Civil War and actually hear what he has to say. I have not met one.
You can. I haven't around here in Tennessee. You'll find them. They're a dime a dozen. I mean, they're especially down in Columbia where we live. Like you can find
a lot of history buffs. Yeah, it's true.
Knowledgeable historians.
I mean, to touch on this briefly, and then we need to move on. To touch on this briefly, when you asked me about the causes of the Civil War, was it about slavery? Was it about states' rights? Was it about anything else? I just looked to sort of the published justification of secession of some of the states, and they talk openly about slavery and preserving it. I mean, to me, that's the QED right there. That's them saying they need to preserve slavery, and they actually talk about the biology of the black man and how he's uniquely, I think in Louisiana's, I can't remember which state, it was Louisiana or Mississippi, talking about that, because of, they're built for it, basically, to work in that kind of climate. I don't know what happened. Okay.
That sounds like Louisiana to me.
It's one or the other, but anyway, so to me that seems like, let's not pretend it's about anything else. But we got to move on. I think maybe the last thing I want to get into is the alt-right versus the alt-left, as some people are calling it now. And I know you're excited. That's good. That's good. And this can be our final topic for tonight. That I believe firmly that sets up a false equivalency. And I think you already want to push back that we're calling the Antifa the alt-left because they act in a way that's similar, that's violent, that I don't know. Someone explain to me why we should treat those things as the same, on the same moral plane. Say again?
Say it again, James?
Said Evan, the ball is in your court, brother.
Ball's in my court. Okay. Oh, geez, where to begin? So, I have you guys got me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Sorry, my alert came up on my phone. I think there was a. I'll start with this. There was a topic we talked about before we started broadcasting, or maybe it was earlier. We were broadcasting. I don't remember. We were talking about what the numbers were, right, at this particular event when we're talking about Charlottesville in general. And I don't know what these numbers were. James, could you actually give me those numbers that you were talking about earlier?
It was my understanding that that there were roughly around 500 on the side of the white nationalist protesters, and again, at this point, you're getting lumped in. If you're there to protest a statue,
sure. Yeah.
You're getting lumped in. So it was roughly 500. It was. I wasn't sure of the number of counter protesters between Antifa or allegedly BLM, although we talked about that earlier. But whoever was there to protest or counter protest, I heard there were more of them. I don't know what the numbers were on that. But
yeah,
we can even assume 500 apiece and scroll from there.
Okay, sure. So I don't know what the exact numbers are myself as far as Charlottesville goes, but one of the things I do know is that Antifa, one of the things that they have over the white nationalists, I feel, is that they actually have persuasion. Whereas typically, I mean, you hear something about white nationalists and your instant thought is disgust.
Yes.
Right? And it should be. It absolutely should be. Whereas Antifa, I've seen them protest and shut down Ben Shapiro talks.
Oh, yes.
Protest and shut down Ann Coulter talks. Protest and riot, full-scale riot, full-scale property damage, public property damage, riot, Milo Yiannopoulos talks. They've been around for much longer than just Charlottesville, and they have made it very clear what their goal is and what their purpose is, which is to cause violent disruption at things that they don't like.
They don't even try to hide that fact. That's a mission statement, is that we are violent resistance to Nazis and fascists.
Sure, and if you go to their website right now, you'll look at their definition of fascist, and I'll pull it up if we want to read it off. It's
sure.
Pretty much, if you're Republican, conservative, if you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, if you're a fascist.
Oh yes,
right? They have completely.
Really? That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
We go to antifascist.org, I think it's what it is.
Yeah, Antifa is they're an anarchist organization. People don't seem to understand it. One of their main tenets is anarchy. They are anarchists. But I totally get their idea of fighting government in general. But yes, if you work for the government in any way, shape, or form, you are the enemy.
Yeah, and they actually name firefighters, right? So these are the kind of people I worry about. This is the kind of thing where I worry about, like, should we punch Nazis? Yes, we should. What's the definition of Nazi to you? And then you have these extreme Antifa out there. They're like, anybody that votes Republican? Oh, well, shit. We've got a whole other conversation we have to have right now then. Because should we punch white nationalists and Nazis? Sure, they're talking bullshit. Knock them in the head. Some people need it.
Yeah.
Right? But it comes down to...
I know Melissa likes that idea because she used to threaten me all the time.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, like, I mean, some people deserve to get fucking hit. I mean, it's part of life. You're gonna get hit every now and again, right? Not every now and again, but like once in a blue moon. If you're being a dipshit, you're gonna get hit. If I talk shit to a 10-year convicted felon, I'm gonna get my ass knocked out. Right? Yeah. I shouldn't talk shit to that guy. Right? But when we come down to when we say Nazis, this is why I get so worked up when and this is when people start calling me a Nazi. Because when I start defending, like, I'm like, hey, no, you probably shouldn't do this, because there's people out there that actively go to these events all the time, that have power, have persuasion, have connections in the police department, and they go out there and they're going to start violence with hairspray flamethrowers. Right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a big fucking issue. We should talk about it. Anyway, that's a starting point. I'll let James go. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I just jumped in there with, we talked about this a little bit Monday too, was Antifa and the counter-protesters that really came armed and everything, these people showed up looking for a war. And I feel like the white nationalists that came to this knew that was the case. They knew that's what was going to happen. Oh yeah, they knew they were doing that shit. And all they had to do was march the night before and carry tiki torches and scream white power, and Antifa was going to come running, and they got the war they were looking for.
Hey, James. I mean, this is Haley.
Oh, hey, Haley.
Yeah, Haley and Lace have joined us.
Did you watch the Vice documentary? I mean,
No, I have not had time. I actually plan on watching it tonight. I haven't had time to That sounds like Antifa.
I've heard both. I've heard both. But anyway, I mean, one of the things that they, sort of like to have associated with the, image and persona that they're trying to portray is people who come out with bats and everything. But, I mean, as we learned from the Vice documentary, the people who were the white nationalists came with shields, took training.
Yes.
They came with guns.
We've covered that. We've talked about that big time. I mean, I subscribe. I was mentioning earlier. I subscribe to emails from all across the board, all kinds of wacko groups, so I can kind of keep an eye on them. And Evan and I were both talking about this. Is that it was absolutely clear. It was absolutely clear. The point of the Unite the Right rally was a white supremacist, white nationalist movement rally. It was not about defending the statue. It was obviously clear, based on the speakers who were there, based on everything going on.
That wasn't my criticism.
Sure.
James,
Yeah.
that
Let Haley
wasn't my
finish.
criticism. My criticism was you saying, discussing the issue of, yes, Antifa is associated with images of violence, and this rally, there's people with tiki torches. That's not necessarily accurate. This rally, there were people with shields. There was also nationalists with shields and tiki torches and bats.
Oh, I know.
Weapons.
That is exactly what I was saying. Yeah. The white nationalists showed up looking for a fight, and they brought everything they needed for the fight. They came armed for a fight, and they knew that.
No wonder no one got shot. It really is. There were images of guys holding ARs and all kinds of.
Yeah,
I'm waiting.
And I said that. I said that as well. That it's to me is a matter of time before this is a massacre of one side or the other. I don't know why it hasn't happened yet, to be honest with you. But if this continues on the trajectory that it's going on, one person died this time, more people might die next time. And how long before 10 dudes show up with ARs and decide to just mow down the other side? I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. I'm not trying to encourage anyone to think that shit, but I don't know why it hasn't happened yet.
I think that Lacey joined us and she's got her hand up.
I have a good thought. Yeah.
Go for it.
Just figured I'd be polite. No, so I just want to kind of talk about, I agree that you're right, we're a few wackos away from just us all fighting each other and guns ablazing, which would be crazy. But I think that what this whole Charlottesville incident has taught us, and I speak from a position of someone who has watched a monument removal and seen what that's like. I mean, I had Robert E. Lee removed from Lee Circle, or New Orleans did, and it was pretty traumatic, and it was the same type of thing that you see at Charlottesville, where it's both extremists on each side. So what I kind of want to talk about, though, or what I'm interested in hearing is, I can understand the position that people on the alt-right side, and I guess also maybe on Antifa, but really more on the alt-right side, are extremists. But then there's Republicans that at the same time, I think, don't want to see these monuments removed. And so even at the New Orleans protest, it is true, there were 99% of the people were wackos, but there were some people that are, I really don't think that they're racist or anything, but they certainly, are Civil War buffs or history buffs, and they want to see those monuments stay up. I mean, I can, that to me distinguishes someone who truly is like a member of the KKK. I'm not saying that it's not a problem. I'm just saying that it's distinguishable to me.
Sure, but I think, and you missed earlier in the hangout, we were talking about essentially that this thing in Charlottesville, that it was a false premise, that this was about fighting back against, wanting to remove the statue of Robert E. Lee. These were white nationalists here to march for white nationalism.
There's zero proof of this statue bullshit. That's something.
No, there may have been a couple of locals. There may have been a couple of locals that were there for that good reason. But I think we hammered this to death earlier when we talked about. It was very clear.
Yeah, I think we went over it pretty thoroughly.
But going back to what we were just talking about was conflating the alt left and the alt right, and are they equal? And I think we were just talking about how the alt left showed up for a fight. The white nationalists showed up for a fight. There was a fight. People died. Right? Yeah. I think if and this is why, and people are gonna hate me for this, and I totally get it. But I think Trump's right in this case. Yes, both sides are to fucking blame. You both showed up for a fight. Somebody fucking died. You go back to like school, and people people get into a fight, we both get suspended because we both showed up for a fucking fight.
Well, here,
But do you
go
really
ahead.
think that people who were protesting a white supremacy rally were going there to show up to fight, or is it just
Yes.
No. But not, hang on. Not everybody who showed up to protest the white nationalists were Antifa. Not all of them showed. Now, I made a point of this earlier that there was a group of clergy that showed up, and they were in a church praying and singing, and they were surrounded at one point by white nationalists, and there was this tense moment, and the police dispersed them. Like, not everybody showed up to fight on the anti-white nationalists. Now, the Antifa.
There's some bad guys on one side and some bad guys on the other. And I'll say this: I don't agree with Trump's part where there were some good guys on both sides. Clearly, there's one side where there were no fucking good guys.
Thank you.
White nationalists. but that being said, there were some bad guys on one side and there were some bad guys on the other. Well, there were a bunch of bad guys on the other. Either way, two sides showed up for a fight that day. Two sides.
They engaged in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm trying to separate the burger from all of it too, because that was one actor, and he was obviously with the shit heel group. Because if you had to guess which side was going to commit violence, it's going to be the shit heel group.
Well, no, I mean, because Antifa, they will come and they will start fights. And this is me as the raging liberal, leftist, progressive guy. Well, I'll be the first one to tell you, yes, they come as bad actors in any situation as well. They've come for violence, and it's a problem, but it's not equivalent. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I agree with you entirely. It's not.
So that's why I think the term alt left is false and misleading.
Well,
I think it's great.
You shit heel.
Go ahead, Haley. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Alt middle.
Oh God.
Go ahead and adopt alt middle.
I think Haley was trying to talk.
I think it was Lace.
No, I was saying let Chris talk because he'd been trying to say something, but maybe it was the alt middle thing.
Somebody fucking talk.
Yeah, okay, well, David, Antifa was, I mean, I knew that they were all violent and everything, but I didn't realize that every place that they go, there's no peacefulness to their protests at all. It's always violence.
100%. That is what they aim to do.
Yeah, and
that's what they do every time they show up. They go there, they grab an easy headline. They show up to any right-wing event, they shut it down with violence, and then the headline reads tomorrow, hey, right-wing event got violent.
Yes,
but that's instant fucking blame goes to when you read that headline.
But in their mind, are they like the Crusaders? Are they like the Robin Hoods of?
I mean, I don't think that all of that is completely accurate.
Look at their mission statement. Their mission statement vilifies firefighters.
Where did you find this mission statement? I wasn't able to find that.
Government, you are the Antifa, you are the enemy if you are a government employee. They are an anarchist group based on violence. That's what they do.
The term anarchy, that's a common thing that's misunderstood. The term anarchy is for some reason equated with violence, but it doesn't have anything to do with violence.
It doesn't necessarily. What it is, believing there is no need for a government. That's anarchy.
Yeah, I don't associate anarchy with violence. I associate exactly, James, with,
But it's not. But Antifa is a violent anarchist organization. The whole point of what they do is violence. That is the root of what they do. They're not there to get license plate numbers and expose people to the world, which is what they should be.
Well, they say they do that as well.
I think you're incorrect on a certain degree. The purpose of Antifa is intimidation.
Google them.
That's why. I mean, I have. That's why they like to associate with images of like bats and hammers and stuff like that. They want to,
Before you got here, we read off their manifesto. Like we actually went and looked at their.
We read some of it, but yeah.
Based on violence. That's the entire point. Is to commit violence. It's violent resistance.
Well, no. What she says intimidation, and she's correct. That is their goal. Is intimidation.
Yeah.
But when you read when you read the events that they've gone to and what has happened, they show up with flamethrowers. They show up with clubs and bats and shots and all kinds of stuff, and almost always it results with violence, and there's one common denominator every single time. They're just a violent organization. I mean, they've already been labeled by New Jersey as a terrorist organization.
And they should be. They are a terrorist organization. They are a left-leaning terrorist
Yeah, I
organization.
mean, I don't think it's a good idea to, I mean, violence is a very easy thing to do. Everyone's capable of it. So I don't think that it's something that's going to really be that persuasive.
It's criminal.
Can do it.
It's criminal.
Yeah. But it works for them. They shut the events down. I mean, they've shut Ben Shapiro down from speaking numerous times. They've shut down
Shapiro is a white nationalist, or even isn't part of the alt-right at all. He thinks they're trash.
Yeah.
Well, can I say something? So I want to hit on this one point that is sort of riding the line is there's the argument that I hear about, okay, well, it's bad to silence speech, i.e. shutting down Ben Shapiro, but at the same time, the speech that they're shutting down shouldn't be spoken. That seems to be one of the arguments that the left is asking.
Ben Shapiro is not a white supremacist or alt-right.
No, he's Jewish, isn't he?
He's the Hebrew Hammer.
He's not. No, he's not a Richard Spencer.
Here, let me settle this one real quickly. Okay, Ben Shapiro says things that are objectionable, stupid, whatever. You don't like it. Ann Coulter, Richard Spencer, let them come and say whatever dumb shit it is they want to say and protest peacefully. They get to speak. You can speak. Now, if it happens that a university says no, we don't want this person. If it happens that whatever group disinvites them. That's not them losing their free speech rights. That's them being told to fuck off. You have a right to free speech. You don't have a right to a platform. There. Soapbox done.
But then you heard the reasons why they shut these events down. Because they're afraid of the violence.
Right. No, you're right. And I disagree. And I agree with you that is also wrong. So again, if it comes to that.
Wait.
It's liability.
Shut down the A&M. The reason why A&M shut down its speaker that was happening on 9/11 was because of violence.
Yeah, no, yes, it is. Yeah, their concern was the response directly to what just happened in Charlottesville, which is a reasonable response.
Well, except that Richard Spencer came there in 2016 and incited a whole lot of other fiery theories. So I think that this is kind of a convenient tactic.
Oh, I agree with you entirely. I mean, I don't think you're wrong at all. I think we're on the same page here. I mean, these people are shit people. I would not blame any university, who's a public university, who invites all kinds of people to talk, to turn away alt-right and white nationalists. I don't blame them.
Thanks for
Yeah, I mean, there is an issue specifically with A&M and Richard Spencer coming to talk there, and the event got canceled. It happened last year, and even though it was in a private room at A&M, and A&M's always trying to act like they're not the racist public school in Texas.
We all know. Come on, A&M. You're the shit.
Anyway, so I mean, I'm not saying that they canceled this, rally that they were going to host on 9/11 because of Charlottesville. I'm saying that they've done this in the past. They've experienced it in the past, and it's sort of rich to say that this is the only freaking reason that they're doing this. They're also playing a narrative.
Sure.
Their speech is being victimized. That they have to shut down because of violence concerns. It's like, no, bitch, it's happened before.
I would never, in any kind of issue where I had some kind of say, I wouldn't allow any of these people anywhere near my public.
That doesn't matter. I'm just saying that this seems like a thinly veiled attempt to capitalize on something that's going to make them seem a little bit more persuasive because you're treading on First Amendments right now.
They have to do that.
Everyone can agree that that's
They have to do
this. That kind of mentality, that kind of narrative shifting, the fact that it's emboldened this much, that they're being that strategic, is something that gives me pause.
Okay, I think that's
Hey, can I ask Haley a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, please. I was.
I'm going to ask everybody this a question. So what's the speech that got shut down? I'm ignorant of this. So can someone tell me?
Oh, Richard Spencer was invited to A&M in I think it was last year. I think it was 2016 sometime. It was before Trump was elected, and it was during the campaign. And then at the time I didn't even know who Richard Spencer was yet, but there was just this massive amount of outrage. A&M is a publicly funded school, and even though it was in a private room that wasn't even technically owned by the university, an A&M sanctioned speaker who's coming to visit here, it had to be canceled just because there was an and it wasn't because of a concern of violence, it was because a lot of people are like, we don't want this person associated with Texas A&M. And then Texas A&M has been getting the same kind of shit about the 9/11 rally, the white nationalist 9/11 rally that's been scheduled that I knew was going to get canceled, and now they're saying, oh, out of fear of violence. That's
so who got canceled this time?
I don't know.
Richard Spencer.
Oh, it's Richard again. It's Richard again.
I don't
I think,
know.
but hey, I think it's fair to. I'm not sure that's completely fair because, I mean, you and I both know that A&M did this. It was a damn catastrophe for them. I mean, people in Texas went crazy about this. So I think it's. I don't think it's right to necessarily say that it's thinly veiled. I don't. And the situation has changed substantially. Even
I'm
in
not
just a year.
calling A&M thinly veiled. I'm calling the white nationalist speech
Yes.
thinly veiled in their excuse.
And I completely agree with you there, Haley. I think that's exactly what this is. I think that's exactly what the Unite the Right rally was. It's a thinly veiled attempt to create conflict to make them not look like bad people.
Yeah.
Their message is inherently shit. They're inherently people.
Richard
That's a
Spencer
really
canceled his own
interesting
event.
take, Haley.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
saying, when opportunity knocks.
They've got to find something they can promote so that the president can fucking kiss their ass. You know, like, they need something they can promote so the president can stand here and say, oh, well, Antifa, and oh, well, they aren't bad people, and I'm sure there's some nice people there. They've got to have.
Yeah, because they're just
our rights are
trying
being
to
oppressed. They're oppressing our rights. They're oppressing our rights. They need the ACLU to stand up for them and do something because their platform is garbage. And any decent human being who listens to their platform is going to say, somebody punch that cock.
They're thriving off of the victimhood. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're playing the victim role quite well nowadays. You know, it's interesting to me that for so many years, the conservative right in America would never let anyone rationalize bad behavior by circumstances, but yet Trump and his followers often rationalize things to play the victim quite quickly.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, I agree as well.
No, that absolutely is. That's one of the things I like. People like to think I'm a Trump supporter, but one of the things I fucking hate about Trump and a lot of his more fervent supporters are that the victim card just gets played over and over and over again. It drives me fucking nuts. I hate it.
Oh yeah, no, it's obnoxious.
It's made more aggravating by the fact. It's made more aggravating by the fact that we always were the ones called snowflakes.
Right.
I mean, I felt
You know the term I heard. You know the term I heard recently is broflakes, and I think it's fucking amazing. It's the aggrieved white man, you know, and that, you know, to me, there's such a strong correlation between these kinds of grievances and Trump support. I mean, they're broflakes.
I have never been able to stand the term snowflake precisely because everybody who uses it normally is a whiny little piece of shit.
They're a little broflake, yeah.
By everything that happens, and they whine about it all the time. And then they're like, "Oh, you're a snowflake." I'm like, bro, that."
Wait, who did we just lose? We just lost Haley.
We lost Haley.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Can we be all snowflakes?
Snowflakes.
All snowflake. I like that. You know,
Let me go back for just a second though, because
Go ahead.
I mean, I'm a history guy, right? So, is there ever a case where, and I know how most of you are going to answer this, is there ever a case where there is a rational use for violence against Nazis and white supremacists? Because if you look at the anti-Antifa, whatever it is, anyway, its origins were from the 1930s and the Nazi movement. And there are all kinds of images of members of the German-American Bund in all kinds of altercations with people who opposed them during World War II. And I can promise you the people who used violence during World War II against them were considered patriots and everything else. So is there ever a case where violence is justified?
I'll start the answer. I'll start the answer, and people are going to disagree with me on this, and I hope this is a good discussion because I'm really looking I'm going to go with the tried and true philosophical when is violence okay in self-defense. Yes.
Always. I mean,
yes.
Look,
and if you're the kind of person that believes that, hey, I know Nazis had ovens for Jews in World War II, and I guess these guys now probably do too. I'm going to do some preliminary preemptive violence. Then I think you're no better if you're going to do preemptive violence. I think.
So you don't subscribe to the doctrine of preventative self-defense.
There's no such thing as preventative self-defense, and you have to perceive an imminent danger of serious bodily harm.
Well, that's still preventative, though, isn't it?
What he means to say is like a prophylactic thing, something that
that's for nations to decide. That's for nations to decide as far as war. As an individual, you don't get to have a prophylactic measure.
Please don't go esoteric in the definition of self-defense as it relates to criminal law right now.
I'm not saying. I think it does apply in the sense of
James,
justified.
James, let me sum it up for you quickly. Han shot first, okay? Just let that sink in. Han shot first.
Is it pawn shot? What did you say?
Han
You know what? They got so embarrassed.
shot.
They edited it out, made Han shoot second.
I know, right? Because they were embarrassed because it looked ugly.
Shot first.
Han totally shot first. I mean, I agree. But look,
But no, I think James is right. I think we're all gonna probably this is good to
But
be a
Han
healthy
also
disagreement.
probably-
But I think James is right though. I think the legal definition of self-defense is very applicable here because it's talking about politics and law. So of course,
you do not get a right to commit violence against people because of what they say because you don't like it.
I mean, we're talking about politics and law, but I thought the question was, is violence ever justified? And we've knocked on one notch on the stick is for self-defense, and now
Yeah.
we're talking about it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, I think that
You're not wrong.
I tailored towards self-defense and explained that it's.
I think Lace has something to say.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, first of all, how about we just make there a rule that there's no knives or guns or vehicles within areas where you're protesting if you're protesting. I mean, that would be one.
Thank you.
how do you enforce that though?
Yeah, that's immediately what I was thinking.
This.
And what about the right to bear arms? I mean,
Yes.
Arms down, guys.
No.
you see how muddy this gets?
Whole thing with
A
these
very
guys.
specific law about this. It's called the law itself. The criminal law is carrying a weapon with the intent to go armed, and it's a very specific definition of it's okay for you to have a weapon like a handgun specifically is accepted. Is if you have a carry concealed permit, you're accepted from it. But other than that, you can't carry a weapon with the intent to use it as a weapon.
I mean, that's
But
fine.
what if you hang on? But what if you're carrying it with the intent for self-defense?
All that shit counts in Tennessee.
What if you're carrying it with the intent for self-defense?
No, you can't. That's the intent to go armed. If you're carrying around a shield and a club, you have the intent to go armed if you intend to use it in its prescribed manner.
Then what's the point?
Yeah, but my understanding though is
Yeah, I'm a little lost here too.
If you go up to a rally, you can enforce that without infringing on free speech because you've broken a criminal law.
well, maybe remember these laws are state to state, so
They are, of course. I'm talking about Tennessee. That was my example. But
my thinking is in some states, especially in my state, there's some discussion about whether things like the Castle Doctrine apply to your personal faith, whether you're at home or not.
well, in Tennessee, we do believe that. But you're not allowed. You can defend whatever weapon you choose to defend yourself in a moment where, again, you go back to self-defense. It's fine. If you're in a bar where it's illegal for you to have a firearm and you still use it in self-defense and it was justified, the law grants you immunity as far as being prosecuted for having that gun on you illegally. What I'm talking about is the way to shut down these protests is if people show up with shields and bats and shit, you just broke the law. You're already breaking the law. It has nothing to do with your free speech. You're breaking the law. You can be arrested for that. I think that's...
And then, well, here's the follow-up question. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
Well, I think it might have something to do with your Second Amendment, though.
For a firearm.
I mean, not necessarily the Second Amendment, but it might be considered, I don't know, a fucking thought crime. Oh, you have a gun, and I know you're totally fucking intending to use it for violence. That just sounds a little bit like a fucking thought crime to me.
I feel like
No, I feel that too. Well, the next thing you want to consider too is how good is a law if you can't enforce it.
I actually think that needed to be the first thing that was addressed. Talking about going into thought crimes and whatnot totally puts the cart before the horse for me, at least. We all know, for example, the terrorist attack in Sweden. One of the things that came out of that event, some dude saw a truck that was being unloaded that was right by these businesses in this walked area, and he jumped into the car and floored it into a crowd of people and killed 10 people. And the thing that Sweden learned from that event was this is really hard to fucking prevent. But someone standing on every corner making sure someone doesn't walk into a van, and we can talk all we want about implementing thought crime laws, but
I'm asking you, what's the thought crime? What's the thought?
At the end of the day, I think that you can't forget the sort of practicality on it, and trying to address a very big problem in a certain way, it does come across as a thought crime.
But what you're describing isn't a thought crime.
But what we're describing is people who have united for a rally that is coming and they have a permit for it, and when they show up, they're all carrying shields and weapons and body armor.
Here's an idea. Or how about that Charlottesville? Listen, in the case of Charlottesville, where the mayor said ultimately, it's a state of emergency, so on and so forth. Everyone has to disperse. Whatever the ruling was that made them disperse, there could be a rule that says if you are in a protest that after this rule to disperse has been issued and you have a weapon, that would put the onus on the person to think before they show up. I wonder if I'm going to go be around a bunch of freaking Antifa people that we know have a credo of let's, incite violence.
I think she touched. I think Lace. Hang on. Lace touches on something interesting here. That when people are showing up, with weapons and stuff like that, and there's going to be violence, and you say, okay, well then you have to disperse. I mean, there are reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on freedom of assembly, right? Would this not qualify as one of them moving forward?
I think the fact they show up and they're passing out shields qualifies as one of them.
The thing is, the way that
But hang on, James. Let me say this. If you have, and I'm specifically addressing firearms. If you have the right to bear arms and you show up with a gun, you really can't glean legally intent from just carrying a gun.
No, they're accepted from that. You're correct. And now in TP, we are hazy on open carry. We encourage concealed carry. Meaning you're not walking around with an AR-15 on your back. You have a pistol tucked in your pants.
Right. I'm not even talking about pistols. I'm talking about ARs, which in Texas you can walk around with all day long. But I mean, you lawyer people know culpability is a sticky thing, and proving it.
Yeah, I agree. But I think my issue here is I'm not talking about firearms because, honestly, in these situations, it doesn't seem like too many people use firearms. I mean, this is a situation where people come with baseball bats because they think they're stunning the law.
Yet.
You can't walk around with a baseball bat and a fucking shield going to...
I mean, you can't fuck around with a car. That's the common thing that I'm seeing is cars.
Sure.
The weapon of choice.
Well, yeah.
I think guns have become the nuclear bombs of protest because the minute that you pull out a gun and you shoot somebody,
no, that's a good point. Try that shit in Tennessee as one person, and you're going to be riddled to death with bullets with like 38.
Well, hell, Chris is from Texas. I think he knows that shit too.
I mean, someone from Houston here also aware.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Murder capital.
Yeah. But no one in New Orleans. People in New Orleans don't do what's right. They're like 30 criminals being like, oh shit, somebody got shot. I'm not pulling out my
You people in Louisiana got voodoo and all that other shit factor in.
Hey man, stop hating on Louisiana though, just real quick.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, hang on, how about that?
Oh boy.
Oh, I love New Orleans so much.
I've been drunk in New Orleans many times.
Anytime I tell someone that I'm from New Orleans, I just have to wait a second before they tell me a story anytime
years of like 2007 through 2009, because they're all real hazy for me.
No, not really.
Well, you mean like most of when I was?
I mean, it was.
What's Melissa's name?
What?
What were you saying, Melissa?
I just wanted to make a comment on. I was born and for half of my life raised in Louisiana. Most of my life raised in Texas. I went to college in Texas, and my very first trip as an adult, unsupervised adult, to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, I came home with what I thought was a 3-day hangover. It was really the flu. So I'd never had a hangover before, and I thought that was the worst thing ever. But it was really the flu.
I realized the 3-day hangover was actually alcohol poisoning, and I needed to go to the ER.
Oh boy.
This was
We're all veterans of the ferment here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. To the ferment.
To the ferment. I think on that note, if anyone has any closing thoughts or anything, now is the time. But I think otherwise, time to put a bow on this thing and send it out into the world.
Yeah, I think we probably ought to do that. I'm going to bow out because I've been running my mouth this entire time. Does anybody have anything they want to add?
No, man.
I will. I want to say the first thing I thought when I saw the Charlottesville attack was, fuck, we're now going to be just even more polarized than ever. And that is the main takeaway I got from that, and I feel like that's come true. But what I want to say is thank you guys for having me on here.
Sure.
I feel like you guys and what you're doing right now, bringing on so many different diverse backgrounds, is that you're actually counteracting that and bridging that gap. And I really appreciate you guys having me on. I had a great time.
That was really nice.
Yeah.
I think Evan has shown that he should invite to Fermenting Opinions.
Yeah, I think there'll be a place for him there. Yeah, absolutely. So.
Sure, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cool. Cool.
Thank you again for coming on, and I apologize for the confusion.
And again, go ahead.
As a member of, I mean, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm more of a right-leaning libertarian, so I'm kind of near the fence. I may not be straddling the fence, but I'm close to the fence. One thing that I really feel that for both parties is important to I guess try to remember going forward is labels come with consequences, and dangerous to take what someone says and slap a label on them, because you have to consider, perspective, point of view, and all of that. What I'm getting to is I'm not very kind about how I feel toward people that just automatically want to slap the Nazi label on someone that, I mean, granted, if someone is a self-professed neo-Nazi, white supremacist, skinhead, you deserve that label. That's fine. But I think that, and I'm seeing, and maybe y'all are not seeing this, maybe I'm the only one, but I'm seeing a lot of this on my Facebook wall and on comments. People are throwing around, well, you fucking Nazi. I'm sorry, you do not use that term lightly. No more than you want to sit there and call someone on the far left, you radical communist. You got to be careful about, especially in this day and age when everything is so overly sensitized, you've got to be very judicious about throwing words around casually.
I think that that's a very good point. I mean, I think that if you are going to have the balls to slap a label on yourself that you says identify who you are, you better respect that point of view. It better be actually true, and you better own it. But if you are going to just go about willy-nilly by trying to use certain labels and defining various aspects, just make sure that you define your identity well, because it's disingenuous. If you're not a Nazi, don't call yourself a Nazi. Stop calling people a Nazi. If you're not something, don't do that.
Yeah, Godwin's law used to be a thing. When you hyperbolically comparing someone to Hitler because you disagree with him, right? That's where Godwin's law, that's essentially what it evokes. you know, it's not really a violation when there are actual Nazis running around, people who are white nationalist anti-Semites. You are indistinguishable from a Nazi. To do what?
The bad part about Edwin Blah, and I said this the other day, you know, I'm quite a student of Hitler, and there are parallels. So when you draw those parallels, people automatically dismiss them because they think you're just invoking.
Right. It's not fallacious anymore. Essentially.
You don't. That person's really evil, so we're just going to ascribe that to them.
But it's just as important though to not ascribe, like Melissa was saying, not to ascribe that to everybody, you know, in broad strokes, because that's a big part of the problem, isn't it? That if you're a leftist, you're an American-hating socialist, and if you're on the right, you're a fucking Nazi, right? And they're both wrong most of the time. When we're talking about Antifa and these alt-right people, these are not normative things. To do what, Lace?
Or Black Lives Matter, or BLM.
Right, because there are certain bad actors that are affiliated, sure.
Yeah, there's a book that is that just came out that's called I think it's called like Beyond Identity Politics or whatever. I just read like a chapter that was released online, but it's a pretty interesting take of basically we need to sort of stop going to this identity place in all of us, because all that does is kind of isolate ourselves from other people who might not have something in common with a particular identity. And you know, it's sort of like promulgating an idea of a morality high horse. You belong to a certain identity and you think that other ones are better, or that you can say certain things because you are this identity or something. But just to actually take a step back and stop associating yourself so much with, oh, this is an identity of mine, so that means that I'm justified in this belief or this opinion or something like that. Then you actually are getting back to trying to reconnect with everyone that's in America.
So,
And I agree,
Haley,
and that is such a huge rabbit. Haley, I agree with everything you say. First of all, but we could have a whole separate hangout just on identity politics, and I'm sure we'll do that sometime in the near future. But I think for now we've beaten all the Nazi and Antifa horses to death here tonight. Because we've been going a little bit here. I think we're working on 2 hours here.
What Melissa and Haley were both saying is that what Melissa is saying is be careful when you try to place a hat on somebody's head. You know, make sure it's their hat. Yeah. What I think what Haley was trying to say is make sure that hat looks good on you before you start wearing it.
Yeah, and like, you know, if you don't want to get called out for wearing that fucking hat, don't put it on.
Well,
Exactly.
and even further than that, part of, and I could be wrong, and then lambast me if I am, but part of, I think, the state of affairs today is that there has been too much casual usage of a negative euphemisms and slapping labels on people prematurely or unnecessarily, and there's been a pushback toward that. So it's kind of like a reaction, counter-reaction, or if you're an SNL fan from back in the 70s, a point-counterpoint type of thing.
I don't think any of these people were born in the 70s.
Oh, well.
Yeah, we have this thing called the internet, though, and we watch.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Yeah, you should. Hey, Chris, you should go to YouTube.com.
When you start pushing someone into a corner, the natural reaction is to push back. And so sometimes slapping these labels on each other is just adding fuel to that push fire, that push war. So I think that what we need to do as a nation, instead of continuing to say, well, Donald Trump is a Nazi, and I'm saying this, I've got some friends that I think are very sweet people, but they're throwing around this one meme that just broke my heart. I'm no Donald Trump fan. I don't like Donald Trump, but they've got the swastika swinging, and in the background, it's in black and white of Hitler, of a picture of a colored picture of Trump.
Why not?
It's offensive.
yeah, that color picture.
Yeah, it's just offensive to me because I feel like, that's a bridge too far for me. I think that's when you need to be careful with when you start throwing out, you know, the whole Nazi and Hitler. It's still just, yeah, it's just, I think, dangerous territory to tread on. Is all I'm saying.
I mean, yes, the point is you better make sure the hat looks good before you put it on. The thing that I am actually critical about, though, with respect to Trump, is everyone gets mad when he doesn't specifically call out a white supremacist group, because you have to call out that white supremacist group as being this racist thing. You know, my issue is, it's like, well, he didn't say, like, she was the victim of someone who was a part, you know, who was exercising extreme hate, you know, and he didn't actually call it the ugly thing that it was, but, you know, he said all sides, which, I mean, the fact that we're even so concerned about sides is alarming. You know, just someone was murdered because some other dude hates a lot of people. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So, I think that,
It's
like,
one way to take it.
so the people giving him criticism for not calling out white supremacists, I think that, you know, I don't think that he actually thought it was, you know, it's something that I need to be careful about, because then I need to make sure that I always call out this particular groups when certain shit happens. But also, like, dude, don't say all sides. Like, actually think about what just happened and say someone was murdered because there's a lot of hate in the world.
I think it was completely and totally relevant, and you could address both sides easily by saying, this white nationalist shit has to go, this is not acceptable at all. And then you could turn and say, Antifa, your response is not helping.
All that
Where
is
you're
is
coming
creating
from,
division
where
and
you're coming from, but
labeling
that's not
sides.
helping
Why
either.
can't
But
you-
let's talk about
all that is creating division and labeling sides. Why can't you say, dude, it's a crucible in America right now. Hate is on the high. Someone was killed because of it.
Isn't that what you said?
That's basically.
No,
That is, I mean, Haley, I think that is kind of where he went with it. There was bad stuff on many sides. The hate, you know, that's what he said. You know, and again, that creates an equivalency between, you know, Antifa and white nationalists, which I don't think
when you say
exists.
there's hate on both sides, you're implying that it's a competition. You're implying that they're on opposite sides.
No, you're not giving them a competition because you're not declaring a winner. Competition implies there is a winner.
Yeah, it's the
What he's doing is
When
he's
you
saying
say all sides, you're implying.
He's saying you're both wrong. He's saying you're both
It's the
wrong.
doctrine of one.
this is one time when Daddy Trump sat down and spanked both the kids. He was like, "Fuck off." All right, stop this shit. All right. I'm
We
sorry.
should hang up and after hours. Like,
I don't understand why he bothered to say sides at all.
I don't either.
You want to address both
That's
problems.
what I'm saying is you should have addressed both of them individually, and you should
What
have
the-
stuck meaning the white national. You should have stuck to rhetoric is dangerous, and then you should have said, as an aside, if you wanted to address Antifa at all you got to do is, as an aside, say, you guys aren't helping. You know, like, your message of...
But you know, he sat down in a room with a bunch of guys wearing suits that were like, you know what we should do instead? Fucking alt-left. You should call me alt-left. That'll
Oh,
fucking
yeah,
change
Steve
things.
Miller, we're literally both in the corners, opposite ends. They're at opposite ends of the room trying to...
It's another label to define a group of people. Great. Let's just keep on adding more labels. Some more division happens among all of us. Awesome. Good job, everyone.
Well, doesn't Trump tend to profit from that? I mean,
But Haley, I think what you're saying there is that his first response, blaming both sides and leaving it at that, was the perfect response, right? He should have never addressed white nationalism. He should have never addressed Antifa. He should have said, hey, you guys are both assholes. Go home. Which he did.
But he's also, remember guys.
What
it's
I
one
think
concept.
is, I think he should have acknowledged that someone died because there's a lot of hate in the world, and that's horrible. I don't think that there should have been a side going on. And, you know, I disagree with you saying, like, it's a competition.
Let's remember, though, at the end of the day, the presidency is a game, and this is a first-term presidency. First term. He's got an election to win. So he goes out there, he says both sides, doesn't play, and then he turns around. He says, you know what, I'm condemning these racist bigots, and that didn't get him the ratings he wanted. So he said, you know what, fuck this bullshit, because he's a little child, and he went right back to his both sides.
I think the issue we got
Well, and Exactly, and so America is sitting. So America is now sitting back and watching a president, waffle through, trying to figure out when and how to discredit white supremacists.
Yeah. Here's the thing though. One person is not responsible for the division of this country. I'll say this. I heard this the other day. I really like to hear this point. It wasn't that Trump made a divided America. A divided America elected Trump.
No, I agree. I totally agree with that.
I agree with that too.
I think the real issue.
The problem is that with Donald Trump not singling out or calling out both groups is that he spent so much time during his campaign just destroying Obama for not specifically calling radical.
Islamic
Anytime. The other issue is anytime anything happens that involves Islam or minorities, the first thing the man does is get on Twitter immediately and start talking about how terrible it's all the shit.
He immediately said that.
Yeah, and then he starts bullying other leaders for their failed responses being quick. Let's talk about the mayor of London because he's Islamic, and Trump's immediate jump out of, why aren't you condemning Islam? Like, where are you? You're a weak leader.
So let me ask this. Okay, so Trump's an idiot. I think everyone can agree with that, even the people at this point. Okay, we all know that. So, but at this point, we all know that. So why can't we all just unite, like people on the right, people on the left, leave fascists way the hell over there, and the Antifa way the hell over there, and then let's just kind of try to find like a moderate middle ground, and like, you know.
I'm just waiting
Hold on. Lacey's still trying to talk, but it cut out. Lacey, we're going to finish it.
I was gonna say the alt middle. I mean, I think that's great, but I mean, look, we're all the people on the left are still totally screwed. If Mike Pence gets, if Trump, when he goes away, if he goes away, Mike Pence becomes president, and we're all gonna be like going to church every Sunday.
No, there's no.
Hey, no, guys, we're not going to talk anymore because there's men and women in this conversation, and men and women cannot associate with one another without their spouses present. So this shit wouldn't happen.
Forgot about that, bro.
That was hilarious. Guys. Hey.
Anyway, here sincerely is to future President Mike Pence.
There you go. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the feed now because there's probably no other good stopping point. If you guys want to keep talking, that's fine. This has been a really cool, interesting talk. I'm sure it's gonna keep going in the after show. But for now, I'm gonna end the feed and sign off for our YouTube watchers. Okay.
Yes, indeed. Good
All
night.
right.
Stay
Stay tuned for an interview with someone who's actually there in Charlottesville. That should be coming hopefully next week. All right, guys.
Yeah, Bradley's